here are all the Outlaws of Thunder Junction mechanic that you can expect from the new installation released by Magic the Gathering this time around. And get ready, because there are some interesting cards here and interesting mechanics that could go really well with your commander deck or standard deck or any kind of deck that you're planning to upgrade down the line. Let's get started. Starting off with the plot mechanic. When you pay for the mana cost, you get to exile the card from your hand and you get to cast it without paying its mana cost as a sorcery in your next turn. Again, remember, this card can be only casted in your next turn as a sorcery, but given the fact that you can cast it without paying a mana cost is actually pretty broken. Now, there are some cards such as Make Your Own Luck, where you get to look at the top 3 cards of your library and get to plot a non-land card among them and put the rest in your hands, which in my opinion is pretty nasty, as it gives you the ability to plot creatures without plot ability. We do have some cards in our hand like Pitiless Carnage, which says sacrifice any number of permanents you control, then draw that many cards, and you get to cast it for 3 mana instead of 4 mana, which is the original CMC. Moving on to the second one, which is the Mount and Saddle mechanic. The Mount isn't a mechanic, but it's a creature type in which these creatures have the saddle mechanic that happens when you attack or after dealing combat damage. This saddle mechanic, once it's activated for its saddle cost, it helps with the triggered ability to make it more impactful. Now, saddle works similarly to how crewing your vehicle works. You get the value added benefit like this creature, for instance. When you activate the saddle tool with Quill Charger, in the brackets it says where you tap any number of other creatures you control with total power 2 and more, the mount will be saddled till end of turn, and once that happens it gains +1 and +2 and menace until end of turn, making things a lot more interesting. Now, here's the best part. Unlike the crew mechanic, which allows you to crew to your vehicle and then attack, mount can exist independently, so that means you can still attack, block, and get tapped under any occasion without the need to saddle. Moving on to the third one, which is the Spree mechanic, which is a completely new mechanic that's been introduced in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, and this mechanic is going to cause quite the ruckus in a lot of format, because there are cards that will disrupt your board either in early, mid, or even in the late game. Now, the card that we have here is Rush of Dread, and Rush of Dread is a sorcery card with the Spree text that says you can choose 1 or more additional cost as long as you're paying the CMC and on top of the additional cost that's written on the side of the card. In this case, we have a CMC of 3, which means 1 colorless and 2 black. So once I've paid that, I can pay up to 5 colorless on top of that to activate 1 or more of this ability. And in this case, Rush of Dread is an absolutely painful card to deal with, especially if your opponent is tapped out in situations like standard or maybe even in limited. Now, there are other Spree cards that exist in the form of instant cards, so that means that's going to be pretty painful, and that's going to excite your board state and perhaps even your opponent's board state as well. Now, the fourth mechanic is Committing a Crime, and since this set is all about dealing with villains and wreaking havoc, that means you get to commit a crime a lot. So whenever you see a card that says Commit a Crime, here's what it counts as 1. When you cast a spell, activate abilities, and put triggered abilities on the stack targeting 1 or more opponent, spell or an ability an opponent controls, permanent and opponent controls, and card in an opponent's graveyard. So if it targets anything on the list that you see here, that means you have committed a crime. But if you have not, then you have not committed a crime. And finally, let's talk about Outlaw, which is not a mechanic, but however is the main theme of this set. Whenever a card says Outlaw, take it as a noun because it describes the following creatures: Assassin, Mercenary, Pirate, Rogue, and Warlock. Now, there are cards that will mention specifically Outlaw, so that means they are describing the creatures that we mentioned earlier. So if you happen to play cards that targets Outlaw, then that describes the following, which again, it's Assassin, Mercenary, Pirate, Rogue, and Warlock. Now, we do have some interesting card here, so take a closer look at this one, which is Outlaw's Fury, which says creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn, and if you control an outlaw, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. And another card will be Take the Fall, and this one says target creature gets -1/-0 until end of turn, it gets -4 and -0 until end of turn instead if you control an outlaw. So that's all there is. There isn't any more. And these are all the mechanics that's introduced in the new Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Hope you guys enjoy your new cards that you have picked up at your nearest local game store. And also at the same time, get ready to upgrade the standard deck, commander deck, any deck that you're playing, because cards in this set are pretty exciting. In fact, we're going to be doing a draft video very, very soon. So stay tuned for that. And we'll be sharing more interesting things about Outlaws of Thunder Junction in the coming days. And I'll see you then. This is Prithviraj signing off, and you're watching The Dork Side. It's all fun and game until somebody loses their shit, which is also pretty fun to watch. And I'll see you then.